Hello, I'm Miranda Kahn. Straight ahead on Newsmax now. President Trump has one condition for his upcoming meeting with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. We'll tell you what that is and what the ramifications could be. We'll also have our weekly check-in with Bill O'Reilly. Hear Bill's take on Sean Hannity being named as Michael Cohen's third secret client. His thoughts about James Comey's new book and his memories of First Lady Barbara Bush. Plus, James Comey had a book signing in New York City. We'll tell you what happened after he opened up the room for questions. But first, we begin with Haley versus Kudlow. On Sunday, UN Ambassador Nikki Haley announced that the U.S. was formalizing new sanctions against Russia. But the very next day, the White House delayed implementing those sanctions. Then on Tuesday, National Economic Council Chairman Larry Kudlow suggested on CNN that Haley, well, she may have been confused when she made those comments. That's when Haley pushed back, telling Fox's Dana Perino, with all due respect, I don't get confused. Now, Kudlow has apparently backed down. A White House official says Kudlow, in fact, called Haley Tuesday to apologize in an effort to kind of mend those fences, if you will. And that's where I want to welcome in today's guest. Today, we're pleased to have with us for the full hour trial attorney and partner at O'Brien and Ryan, Heather Hansen, and author and host of You're Welcome on CompoundMedia.com, Michael Malice. Also with us is Newsmax White House correspondent John Gizzi. All right, want to share your thoughts about the stories that are making headlines. Again, a reminder, you can give us a call. The phone number to call is 1-877-NEWSMAX. Again, that's 1-877-639-7629. We always love to hear from you. So, we mentioned this dust-up between Kudlow and Haley. Despite that phone call, the rumor mill is going haywire over this. A former White House official told The Hill, in fact, that Haley is doing whatever it takes to climb the ladder within the administration. Her name is also being thrown around as the next person to be thrown into the chopping block. And there is also this report from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution suggesting that there's a possibility of Haley and Vice President Mike Pence challenging Trump in 2020. Neither of them have confirmed this. John, lay it out for us. You're on Capitol Hill all the time. Is there any truth behind any of these rumors?
No, absolutely not. To use a phrase in Latin, things will continue semper idem, always the same. The fact is that when people make sometimes unkind remarks about one another in administrations and it seeps into the paper, they usually work these differences out and then go back to what they were doing before. I saw this in the Reagan administration with Secretary of State Al Haig and Secretary of Defense Cap Weinberger. I saw it under Democrat Bill Clinton's administration in the White House when Chief of Staff Leon Panetta was always going at it with the Deputy Chief of Staff Harold Ickes Jr. and the outside advisor Dick Morris. It happens every time when power and ego mix. And the fact is, Nikki Haley will be there in the position where she is well suited as the voice of America. You might call her Auntie Sam.
Auntie Sam, there you go. Well, Heather, then, if there's no truth behind these rumors, then what's fueling all of this?
Well, I think that any time you see some conflict that's played out in the press, and especially with Nikki Haley saying, I don't get confused, it's certainly an aggressive thing to say. And I think that people are sort of playing off of that and seeing where that can go. The talk of her running with Pence in 2020, I think, is sort of putting the cart before the horse. I think that that is far enough away that people are not really having any substantive discussions about that as of yet, especially those two in particular. I find it really interesting. We know that President Trump is not afraid to express his displeasure via Twitter if he has an upset with someone, and he has not spoken out on this. So I don't think I agree with John that it's as big of a deal as we like to think it may be.
All right, we now want to go from rumors stirred up over Russia sanctions to rumors of pink slips stemming from the Russia investigation. Now, during a joint news conference with Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in Palm Beach yesterday, President Trump took yet another swipe at the media coverage of the Russia investigation. His focus, though, this time the growing speculation that he plans to fire Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and Special Counsel Robert Mueller. Here's what he had to say.
They've been saying I'm going to get rid of them for the last 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and they're still here. So we want to get the investigation over with, done with, put it behind us, and we have to get back to business.
Michael, do you think both Mueller and Rosenstein are safe and will remain so?
I don't think that there's been anyone who's felt safe in the Trump White House. I mean, there have been many times in the past where he says, you know, this person has my full support, and then a week later he's firing them on Twitter. Certainly, the problem with having an independent prosecutor or independent counsel is that once they have spent all this money and have put in all this manpower, they have to deliver the goods. So it's very easy, if you look at like Martha Stewart, for example, to find someone who has done something, because when you're dealing with so many regulations and so many moving parts, it's not that hard for a prosecutor to make the case that some law was broken one way or another, even if the basis for which the investigation was put forward is itself discredited.
Don, why do you think their potential firings continue to come up time and time again, as the president mentioned, week after week, especially in the mainstream media?
Well, I do think, and it becomes public, everyone speculates which head will be on the chopping block next. Certainly we saw it with former Secretary, or I should say, Environmental Protection Administrator Scott Pruitt a few weeks ago, and promptly the names start being mentioned. Before that, it was Secretary of Housing and Urban Development Dr. Ben Carson. When I spoke to Secretary Carson, he said, I came to talk to the president days before, and he said, you're with me for 7 years, I hope. When a few private things come out, then the speculation starts. Sometimes it's happened, more times than not, it doesn't. I think the fault is the administration letting the president's words come out when he should be a little more circumspect. But then again, no one is forcing him to put those words on Twitter.
That is true. Heather, yesterday, author Jerome Corsi of the book Killing the Deep State was on this program. He seemed to suggest Mueller's probe would wrap up very soon. Do you agree with his assessment?
You know, I would have agreed, Miranda, but the problem is we keep seeing more and more being added to the probe, especially now with everything that's going on with Michael Cohen. I know that these are probably parallel probes and not the same situation, the same investigation, but I just have no confidence that this is going to end anytime soon, because more and more evidence, further and further investigation seems to be going on, as opposed to finding a finish line here.
You mentioned Michael Cohen, and that's what I want to talk about next. A longtime legal advisor to the president, Jay Goldberg, is reportedly warning him that Cohen could turn on him and cooperate with prosecutors if he's slapped with criminal charges. Now, the Department of Justice is investigating Cohen, as you know, on criminal charges stemming on a recommendation from Mueller's team made to a federal judge. Now, earlier this month, Cohen tweeted that he would always protect the president. Heather, I want to go to you again, though. Could Michael Cohen, in your opinion, actually flip on Trump, and what could that mean for the president?
It's so interesting because we've heard a lot of talk about this. If you read any newspaper today, you'll see articles about whether or not he's going to flip. In order for him to do so, Miranda, he'd have to have information that would be detrimental to the president. And we don't know what that information might be. So could he flip? Absolutely. We see this all the time when there's federal investigations. They try to use one person against another. In fact, we're seeing it right now between McCabe and Comey. So that does happen. But in order for it to happen, one person has to have information on the other. And this assumption that Cohen has something against Trump is worrisome, to be sure.
Don, I want to go to you. You wrote an article for Newsmax.com that's gaining a lot of traction, where you say that Senator Bob Corker is suggesting that many of President Trump's ambassador appointments are not getting confirmed because Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell isn't making them a priority. Is McConnell the person to blame for this?
I would have to say so. And by the way, he didn't say many are not getting confirmed. He said all of them, some of whom were named to key diplomatic positions back in October or November. And it's not just Senator Corker saying this. I was at the International Monetary Fund World Bank meeting, and German colleagues of mine are saying that when Chancellor Merkel visits the White House next week, the failure to send an ambassador to Berlin is going to be addressed and laid out in front of the president. I'm sure he'll be on the phone to Senator McConnell right away.
Michael, how detrimental is this, having 150 seats not filled yet?
I don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be, because very often President Trump is not actually taking the counsel of people who are his subordinates. This is either one of his best qualities or one of his worst, and it's very frequently reported as a source of frustration for people who are working in this government. I know Secretary Tillerson, before he departed, regarded this as an issue. So yeah, it is a bit of a problem, but I think there's far worse things that are going on between Congress and the White House than this one.
Like what?
Well, I think the fact that Paul Ryan's retiring and we don't know who's going to be championing President Trump's agenda through Congress, and if the Democrats take the House in the fall, this is something he's going to have to be ready for, because they're going to be shopping for blood in no uncertain terms.
Yeah, well, do you think that Kevin McCarthy is the man that can do the job?
I mean, I don't know that anyone who can do this job in this day and age. It seems very, very thankless. And it seems, if you look at the last few people who are Republican speakers of the House, they did not have happy endings to their stories, to say the least.
Yeah, it is a tough job indeed. John Gizzi, Kevin McCarthy, as we've heard, is kind of the front runner next in line to replace the Speaker of the House. As Michael mentioned, doesn't always end good for Speaker of the House. Does he want the job? I know he has strongly aligned himself with the president.
Yes, he very much wants the job. And contrary to what I was hearing on Capitol Hill, people were deferring to him immediately rather than the other way around. I thought he would defer to Majority Whip Steve Scalise of Louisiana, a very heroic figure who survived a shooting when members of Congress were practicing for the upcoming congressional baseball tournament. But it turns out that Mr. Scalise declined to run and has already endorsed Kevin McCarthy. Now, remember one thing. Kevin McCarthy was in a commanding position in 2015 when the speakership became open the last time. And yet, when he couldn't nail down the votes on one ballot, he got out of the race, and Ryan was essentially drafted for the job. So right now, he's where he was 3 years ago, but he didn't get it 3 years ago. Postscript to what I was saying, just to comment to Michael, with respect, it's not just Senator Corker or people on the Hill or me who point out the problem with not having 155 ambassadors. It's people in other countries, such as Germany, that are worried about this, and soon someone of the caliber of Chancellor Merkel will raise the issue. That's pretty important in this reporter's book.
Yeah, a point well taken. Heather, we mentioned Kevin McCarthy. As you probably know, House Speaker Paul Ryan has raised a lot of money for the Republican Party. Do you think Kevin McCarthy will be able to raise as much?
Listen, it's definitely not, he does not have the same skill with that. He's not known for that the way that Paul Ryan has been. However, many people rise to the occasion. I think that McCarthy, if he can get everyone behind him, as Michael points out, this is a difficult job. I don't know that anyone is going to want to run against him for it. I don't know that anyone is going to be contesting him for it. But actually raising the money and bringing on those skills are going to be something that doesn't necessarily come naturally to him. And he's going to need the support of the Republican Party to make that happen.
Heather, Michael, don't go anywhere. We still have a lot more to discuss here on Newsmax Now. And again, you can read more about John Gizzi's article talking about those 150 ambassador appointee positions that haven't been filled by going to Newsmax.com. Always a pleasure to have you, John. Still to come here on Newsmax Now, President Trump speaks out about his upcoming meeting with Kim Jong-un, what he says could make or break it from even happening. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Newsmax Now. I'm Miranda Kahn. Tensions between North and South Korea seem to be easing. Still, the U.S. promises to keep maximum pressure on the North until it denuclearizes. President Trump has not only confirmed but praised the secret meeting his CIA director and Secretary of State nominee Mike Pompeo had with Kim Jong-un last week. And he says he hopes his own meeting with the North Korean leader goes just as well. However, Trump did warn that he would call it off if he didn't think it would produce any results.
If I think that it's a meeting that is not going to be fruitful, we're not going to go. If the meeting, when I'm there, is not fruitful, I will respectfully leave the meeting.
Rejoining us now to talk about the president's strategy when it comes to North Korea is Heather Hansen and Michael Malice. Michael is the author of the book, Dear Reader, the unauthorized biography of Kim Jong-il. Michael, I want to start with you. We don't know yet the date or the location of this meeting between the president and Kim, but what do you think of the president's approach to this whole situation?
Well, he's speaking the North Koreans' language, so there have been many times over the years that the North Koreans were kidnapping Japanese citizens for decades, keeping them hostage for years. No one knew what happened to them. These people were being kidnapped at random, and whenever the Japanese government would bring it up, the North Korean people would just get up from the meeting and leave. So President Trump is exactly doing what they have actually done in the past, which is if things get bad, he's perfectly willing to make for the exit. And given all these concessions that North Korea has been publicly claiming to make ahead of a meeting, which makes absolutely no sense, it's very clear that President Trump smells something rotten here and is coming in this with more than a little bit of trepidation, correctly.
Yeah, and I want to go to that in just a moment, but Heather, I want you to weigh in on this as well. Are you optimistic that Trump can negotiate a deal with the North?
You know, it's hard to be optimistic when you're dealing with someone like this, and I think that Michael's point is very well taken, that something certainly smells fishy. I think it is smart for President Trump to be looking at this in a way that he is feeding into their culture by saying that he's willing to get up and walk away. I think that it does sound as though Pompeo had a good meeting back on Easter with the people that he met with, and so, you know, you want to be cautiously optimistic. You want to hope that this can happen, but even a location has not yet been tied down. I think that there's a lot that remains to be seen.
Well, someone else who appears to be highly optimistic over talks with North Korea is South Korea's leader, who says that the North has dropped its long-held demand that the U.S. withdraw forces from the South. Does that pass the smell test? We're going to talk about that. Moon also says that North Korea has also expressed its commitment to complete denuclearization, but is all of this just talk? I mean, after all, back in 1994, North Korea made that same pledge to then President Bill Clinton. Take a listen.
This is a good deal for the United States. North Korea will freeze and then dismantle its nuclear program. South Korea and our other allies will be better protected. The entire world will be safer as we slow the spread of nuclear weapons.
So obviously that deal failed, Michael, and there are different leaders in charge. But I mean, to your point, can we honestly trust that this time will be any different?
Well, it doesn't even make sense even if these were good guys. So before the meeting even started, they're saying we're going to give up our nukes and we're not even going to demand that the U.S. leave South Korea. So we're going to have no weapons to defend ourselves, and you can stand on our border with all your army, even though a week ago you just bombed Syria with France and the U.K. So again, even if these were decent, honest people, that wouldn't make sense from their perspective. And yet their perspective actually is that we're their enemy and that we've been waiting to reinvade, as they claim, since the Korean War ended. So none of this adds up, and it's very, very odd historically and just logically.
Yeah, it does seem to be that way. Heather, okay, so let's say we can take Kim at his word. Is there any way then to actually prove he will continue to live up to his end of the deal?
Well, that would be something that would have to be negotiated. It would have to be part of the negotiation, that there would be some sort of surveillance, some sort of commitment, some sort of way of checking that commitment. And it's difficult to make these types of deals with someone like this, who has consistently shown that he does not stand by his word and is not going to follow the mandates of the rest of the world. So it's a very difficult position to be in, even for the best of negotiators, people with tons and tons of experience at this type of thing. And the truth of the matter is, while Pompeo seems to have had a good meeting, he certainly doesn't have the type of experience we're talking about. So while I think we are all very hopeful that this could be a reality, I think that the majority of us, especially the three of us right here, certainly have our doubts.
Yeah, certainly indeed. Okay, real quickly, we only have a couple minutes remaining, but South Korea is also confirming that it has been in talks with the U.S. and North Korean officials to try and negotiate a peace treaty, a deal that would formally end the Korean War. Preparations are underway for the upcoming summit between the two Koreas, scheduled to take place April 27th. Michael, are you optimistic that we could see a formal truce? And frankly, why has it taken this so long?
Well, I mean, I predicted this, months ago. This was a very low-hanging fruit because obviously they're not engaged in war literally at the moment, and they haven't been since the armistice was signed in 1953. So this is something where the two sides could, at no cost, have a huge win and at no loss. But the reason it's taken this long is because North Korea, as I described in my book, regards Korea as one country that's indivisible. That's why when they refer to North and South, it's always lowercase n and lowercase s. So if they do codify something like this, it might be an acknowledgement that Korea is in fact two countries, which is something that they're very much opposed. In fact, their big slogan, wherever you go, North Korea is one, and all the maps always show Korea as one country.
Michael, Heather, don't go anywhere. When we come back here on Newsmax now, Bill O'Reilly sits down with Newsmax to discuss all the latest headlines, including his memories of former First Lady Barbara Bush. You don't want to miss that. That's coming up right after the break. We're also going to update you on some of the stories that are making headlines here in the U.S. and across the world. Some very interesting stories. A movie theater opens up in one country after a more than 30-year ban. We're going to take you there coming up next. And welcome back to Newsmax Now. Yesterday, our very own John Bachman sat down with Bill O'Reilly to get his take on some of the top stories this week. Here's a look at that interview.
All right, time to welcome back Bill O'Reilly for our weekly interview. Bill, great to talk to you again. And I'm going to pull a Mike Wallace here and say, I hate to do this, but I have to ask you about this whole Sean Hannity revelation being one of Michael Cohen's clients. Should Hannity have disclosed this information to his audience prior to this being revealed?
Probably would have been better had he done that, but the informality of the relationship between Sean Hannity and Michael Cohen was such that I don't know if it even occurred to him, because it wasn't like he hired Cohen to do anything for him. Sean Hannity and a number of other people in Manhattan have access to the Trump organization. Cohen obviously is part of that. Their paths cross all the time. They have mutual interests in real estate. Sean asked him about real estate. I don't know if that even popped into his mind, Hannity's mind. But be that as it may, probably would have been a positive for Hannity to say, I know Michael Cohen and we've discussed certain things, but they have nothing to do with the president's case. And here's what I think. However, in the long term on this, it's a piffle. It doesn't mean anything. So right. What? It's another club that the far left media has to take and beat anybody who supports Trump and the Fox News channel. That's what the story is.
Yeah, the media freakout was predictable. Of course, some people using this as an opportunity to call for Sean Hannity's head. You don't think Fox would actually consider firing him over this, do you?
It's ridiculous. It's absurd. Hannity is their main draw. He's the only link to the past, the glory days of Fox News. And if he's not there, that network is in trouble.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine under any scenario where Rupert Murdoch might fire Sean Hannity. We'll see. We'll see. I want to talk about James Comey as well, with the time we have left in this interview. You know, he's going around doing this book tour, and you can take that for a grain of salt, anything he says. But here you have a former FBI director talking publicly, saying what President Trump did in firing him is in obstruction of justice. Is it reckless for a former FBI director or anybody who's had that type of job in the Department of Justice to be making these types of accusations in a public forum?
I don't know if reckless is the word I would use. I think it's bad for the country. I think James Comey is putting his personal anger above the good of the nation. Absolutely doing that. His name of his book is A Higher Loyalty. Well, it looks to me like his loyalty is to himself. We learned some things. Yeah, we learned some things about him and his family, that they were, at least his family, his wife, his daughters were very pro-Hillary Clinton. I didn't know that. So I don't think the book's going to sell all that well. A couple of weeks, I don't think that most Americans admire James Comey. He's taking heat from both sides. The Hillary people don't like him. The Trump people don't like him. You know, he's trying to make some money. He's trying to even some scores. In the long run, I don't think James Comey comes out ahead on this.
No, I don't think so. You know, he's obviously trying to, put this out there in the public forum to defend his own reputation. You're saying you think it's going to have the opposite effect. It's going to backfire on him.
Yeah, I mean, look, Comey feels that he did a righteous job, that he was upholding the traditions of the FBI. Okay, that's the way he feels. But the way he's coming off is petty. He's saying things that I don't think most FBI agents should say after they work for the Bureau. He's disrespectful to the President of the United States. Disrespectful, flat out disrespectful. Talking about his hair and his face. I mean, it just, to me, my opinion of James Comey, and I went in thinking the guy was a patriot in the beginning, and then as the Hillary Clinton email investigation unfolded, and then later on, then I said, well, he's really not my type FBI director. My opinion of him went down. My opinion now is down further. I don't think James Comey is doing the country any good at all.
With the minute we have left, Bill, I did want to ask you on a personal note, just to reflect on Barbara Bush. The sad news this week, we learned that she had died. I know you met her one time, but just what do you remember most about her? She was such an iconic First Lady.
Well, Barbara Bush wrote me a letter, I guess maybe it was 5 years ago, inviting me to come down to Florida to do a benefit for literacy, a cause she was deeply involved with and the Bush family was deeply involved with. Jeb Bush, I think, was still governor at that time. So, of course, I went. I mean, you don't turn down Barbara Bush. And I sat at the lunch table with her. She was very funny. She was kind of giving me jazz. Oh, you're the big Bill O'Reilly, aren't you? Like that. And I was very amused by it. And I could tell. I think Jeb Bush said something once, and she just looked at him, gave him this like laser look, like, shut up, Jeb. She was very, very prominent. That's the word. Just such a prominent woman. And I think that she dominated that whole Bush clan. And, of course, was an American patriot. So I enjoyed meeting her, being with her for the afternoon, and helping her out with the literacy charity. And I think the country should honor Barbara Bush.
That's a great story, Bill, and thanks for sharing that one. I really enjoyed that, and I'm sure the nation, of course. She's somebody, again, talking about something that unifies the country. We all can kind of agree that Barbara Bush will be deeply missed. Bill, thanks for talking to us again this week, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Right.
And we're going to talk more about former FBI Director James Comey's book coming up next.
Hey, Mr. Comey. Hey, how is it ethical to brief the President of the United States on an unverifiable and salacious dossier? And how is it ethical leadership to not tell him that his political opposition, Hillary Clinton, paid for that? You didn't disclose that information. Why didn't you disclose to President Trump that his opposition paid for the material against you?
Ma'am, you're going to have to leave. You gotta leave.
You're going to get prosecuted, Comey. You're going to get locked up.
Let's go. Leave.
And welcome back to Newsmax Now. You just saw a clip there from an event that happened last night in New York City. James Comey was out promoting his new book, as you can see, with a woman began shouting at him, as you heard, as he was preparing to answer written questions from the audience. That woman is Laura Loomer, a self-proclaimed investigative journalist. She was then thrown out of the event after her outburst. Today she tweeted this, quote, "Who does James Comey think he is to tell me and others what can and cannot be asked? I'll ask him anything I want to ask whenever I want. I won't allow for my questions to be screened by Comey for approval beforehand." And that's where we want to welcome back our panel. Joining us once again, we're pleased to have Heather Hansen and Michael Malice. I want to get your reaction, Heather, to what happened last night in New York. Obviously, that question seemed to be kind of an answer within itself. Right. But do you think it was handled appropriately?
Listen, I wish that she had asked a question. There's a lot of questions that she could have asked that are real questions, questions that many of us wish some of the members of the press would ask, rather than yelling and sort of being aggressive and really, as you said, Miranda, giving more of a statement than a question. I do think that it's appropriate. You know, President Trump, when he was running for president, had many people escorted out of his pep rallies and different things for not liking their question and not liking their approach. It's certainly his prerogative as well as Comey's prerogative. But I think questions are always a good thing, and I do think conversation's always a good thing, and I sometimes wish that both sides of the aisle would be open to these types of questions and not pre-screen them and not only answer questions that they want to answer, but instead questions that need to be answered.
Michael, do you agree?
I think she made some great points. And Laura Loomer's a friend of mine. She just texted me that video this morning, and she's got some nerves of steel on her. She's also the person who stormed the stage at that Citibank event where Julius Caesar was kind of President Trump being assassinated. She's done this to Huma. She's done this to Anthony Weiner. She's done this to Hillary Clinton. I agree that she could have had some more cogent questions. That said, James Comey, you know, to paraphrase Margaret Thatcher, being loyal is like being a lady. If you have to tell people you are, you aren't. So to call his book a higher loyalty when this guy's just trying to sell books and throwing the president on the bus, where if he had any, he's acting like he quit out of integrity when he was fired in the midst of giving a speech via Twitter. So this guy's literally might be the biggest hypocrite on earth. He's 6'7". So I think it's really funny that someone who's that pompous gets humiliated publicly.
Well, there is growing concern among House Republicans that Comey lied to Congress regarding the FBI's investigation into Hillary Clinton. Here's House Freedom Caucus Chairman Mark Meadows.
We know, because we have a number of documents, a growing body of evidence, Brian, that now would suggest that Director Comey, who under sworn testimony a number of times have said there was no coordination between Loretta Lynch's DOJ and our FBI investigation. Not only was that false, but we know that over and over again now we have emails that would suggest that that testimony was false and at best misled the American public, at worst was lying to Congress.
And Meadows' comments come after 11 House Republicans called on the DOJ to investigate several Obama-era officials. They sent a letter to Attorney General Jeff Sessions and the FBI on Wednesday, urging them to open up a criminal investigation into Hillary Clinton, Loretta Lynch, Andrew McCabe, FBI agent Peter Strzok, and his mistress, FBI lawyer Lisa Page. Now there's news that a criminal referral has been made on former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe by the Justice Department's Inspector General. Last week, the IG issued a report finding that McCabe lacked candor on 4 occasions with internal investigators when discussing the FBI's Clinton Foundation investigation. Heather, your take on this latest development that just happened this afternoon.
I think that the referral was not unexpected. I mean, after everything that the Inspector General said last week, everything that we know, the referral was something that I think that anyone who does any work in the law would expect. The now question is going to be whether or not the U.S. Attorney's Office is going to follow that up with a prosecution. I think that the thing that is concerning is that, you know, McCabe and Comey are sort of saying that one another isn't telling the truth. And so it's one of those situations, as I mentioned earlier, where they could actually turn against each other and create bigger problems for each of them. And then you just might see this referral that those 11 congressmen and women are calling for turns into a reality as the battling in between McCabe and Comey turns into a bigger battle.
Yeah, you bring up a very interesting point. Will they turn on each other? But Michael, I mean, just because someone refers something doesn't mean it's actually going to, transpire to become anything. Do you think something will come out of this?
I mean, these investigations drag on for a long time. To get someone to be punished for perjury, it's actually much rarer than people think, especially when these people are law enforcement officers and they know how to have wiggle room and they know how to do double talk. So these are seasoned pros at getting around the law if necessary. So the idea that some people fantasize James Comey or McCabe is going to jail, I think is absolutely absurd.
Heather, Michael, don't go anywhere. When we come back, California makes a deal with the Trump administration on the issue of immigration and the latest on the Puerto Rico blackout. That and much more when we come back. Welcome back to Newsmax Now. Time now to take a look at some of the stories that are making headlines around the country and around the world. The end of an era in Cuba as Raul Castro hands over the presidency to Miguel Diaz-Canel. This marks the end of the Castro's more than 60-year rule. Raul, who is 86 years old, will still lead the Communist Party, though, until 2021. The Trump administration in California reached a deal to send 400 National Guard troops to the border, but Governor Jerry Brown says those troops won't enforce immigration laws or help build any new border barriers. This comes after the Defense Department said just last week that California wouldn't send any troops. So far, 900 troops have been deployed in Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. And the man who gained national attention for hiking up the price of a life-saving drug more than 5,000% has now arrived at federal prison in New Jersey to serve the rest of his 7-year sentence. Officials say the low-security prison has no bars on doors, towers, or even locks. A court found Martin Shkreli guilty of lying to investors last year and cheated them, they say, out of millions of dollars. And crews restore power to more than 1 million residents in Puerto Rico after a fallen tower knocked out electricity to the entire island. The failure is the second largest in the U.S. territory's history. The first was after Hurricane Maria in September. Cannot get a break. All right, the first movie theater, yes, the first movie theater opens in Saudi Arabia after a 35-year ban. Can you imagine? The AMC movie theater chain plans to build, though, another 40 theaters there within the next 5 years. So what's the first movie that screened at the new theater? Any guesses? Yep. The American superhero film, Black Panther. How much would you pay for a condemned house in Northern California? I don't know, with holes in the roof and filled with mildew. Mildew sounds like a dream home, right? Well, how about, I don't know, $1.2 million, and in cash. That's how much this home that you're looking at right now went for. And if that's not shocking enough, according to the listing agent, the buyers, well, they never even went inside the house. You may also remember the burned out house that we showed you earlier this week in San Jose that sold for more than $900,000. A housing shortage in the Bay Area. Could that be what's fueling the sky-high prices? Quick comments there. We only got a few seconds, but Heather, would you pay that much?
Listen, I mean, if you're dying for a home, I guess that you try and scrounge up as much as you can. I couldn't afford to pay that much, but it's certainly a difficult situation for the people in that area who are commuting up to 3 hours to get to work. Something has got to give.
Yeah, it does. Michael, last word to you, 10 seconds.
I'm sure it's a teardown. They didn't need to see it. They're just going to raise it and put up something bigger. And people who invest in real estate aren't that stupid necessarily.
I hope so. Mildew. Oof. All right. Still more to come. Remember snakes on a plane? How about a seal with a... I'm not going to give it away. You'll just have to find out. Coming up next. And welcome back to Newsmax Now. We're going to end today's show with a crazy video of a monk seal pup in Hawaii playing with probably, I hope, the last thing that would come to your mind. Take a look. Yep, yeah, you see it? This seal is only 2 months old and is holding and playing with an orange knife, and of all places, in her mouth. Staff from the hospital that she was taken to in Hawaii say this video should serve as a reminder to everyone to properly dispose of items near oceans. In other words, don't throw a knife in there. Earlier this week, a woman took her pet raccoon to a local fire station in the middle of the night because the raccoon was exposed to too much marijuana. Really? Heather, is this how the whole Tide Pod thing maybe got started? Like, what?
I saw that, Miranda, and I wondered exactly how the raccoon got exposed to that much marijuana and what the problem was. I mean, you'd think it would just nap it off, I guess.
Yeah, you've got teenagers, swallowing Tide Pod, raccoons getting high. What is going on with the world, Michael?
Well, look, this just shows seal gun control doesn't work, because then the seals are just going to get the knives to kill each other.
Well played, well played. Heather, Michael, thank you so much for joining us here on Newsmax Now. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miranda.
And that will do it for this Thursday edition of Newsmax Now. As always, thank you for watching. And remember, you can keep it here on Newsmax TV, and you can always stay connected with us by going to Newsmax.com. We've been talking a lot about the life and legacy of First Lady Barbara Bush. We have lots of wonderful articles with people commenting about that and some of her most memorable quotes. Be sure and check that out by going to Newsmax.com. Have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow.